but it just takes a little while for it to tell me it is. There we go. All good. All good. And we've got people pouring in. This is great. Kia ora tato. Welcome back to another Q&A here at Digital Boost. I'm Georgia Hatzis, and today I get to host Ollie Garside again from Mosh Social Media. I love having Ollie here, and you all love having Ollie here because you all RSVP for this. I am losing my voice. Not that anyone can tell, but it's a good thing because you won't have to listen to me talk for too much. I won't be yammering on and on. I'm just going to intro Ollie. We're going to talk about Social Media 101 for small businesses here in Aotearoa, and I will let you take it away. I'm going to be fielding those questions though, so make sure any questions you have, pop them into the Q&A. I will reserve my voice for the questions. Take it away, Ollie. Welcome.
All good. Thank you very much, Georgia. Glad to be back. So I'm going to start my little presentation. Those of you who've been here before, you'll have seen this before. If you haven't, I always like to start with a little prezzo, and then we'll go into some Q&A time at the end of it. So this is Social Media 101 for Kiwi businesses. So what I thought we would go through is a little bit of sort of, the fundamentals that you need to be considering when using social media for businesses. We find that a lot of small Kiwi businesses tend to either not know or miss some of the fundamentals that can actually make social media such an effective platform. But before that, kia ora e tiwi. No mai ko Ollie Garside toku ingoa. I am Ollie Garside. I am the training and campaign manager at Mosh Social Media. Mosh Social Media is a specialist social media marketing agency based up in Auckland, up on Newton Road. And I've been with Mosh since 2016 in a number of roles, but my current role as training and campaign manager means that I do training sessions like this. I also facilitate all of the training for the Marketing Association of New Zealand. So if any of you have ever done any of their social media courses, you've probably seen my face before. And the campaign manager side of my role is that I manage all of the paid media across the entire agency. So I'll help the social media manager teams that we have do their sort of day-to-day, but I'll have top-level strategic overview. So in terms of who Mosh is, if you haven't heard of us, again, as I mentioned, we're a social media specialist agency, been around since 2009, working with a range of different clients. This is not meant to be that humble brag slide that everybody uses in these presentations, but it's more to show sort of the width and breadth of clients that we've worked across from, client 001, which is Hell Pizza, through to, Fulton Hogan, local government, Auckland Transport, Medical Assurance Society and McDonald's, etc. Like we've been and worked with a number of different businesses across a whole range of different verticals in New Zealand. So we've got a pretty good idea of how social media works. And I'm going to take you through some of the stuff that we've learned over those years. So on the menu for today is basically 4 sections. So we're going to talk about sort of the state of social media in New Zealand as it is at the moment and the platforms themselves, a little bit of a deeper dive into those. We're going to overview, and then we kick into sort of the strategy part of things. And a good social media strategy, generally speaking, has 3 parts to it. The what that you're trying to do. So that's where we set our objectives and actually have an idea of what we're using social media for. The content planning, because that's the interface between us and our audience, and that's kind of the thing that does those objectives. And then the social media advertising, so the paid media tools that we can use to amplify all of the good stuff we do in section 1 and 2. Again, quite top level, but we can, and I'm trying to get through this in sort of half an hour so I can field questions for the last 30 minutes. And if you guys have got anything burning to ask, we can go through it. So in terms of social media in New Zealand, so what we're looking at here is sort of a state of the nation in terms of social media. Now, these numbers are current as of January 2023. This agency, so this is done by an agency called We Are Social and a data analytics platform called Meltwater. They do a global state of digital once a year, and then they also do it by individual countries. The global state of digital report for 2024 is out now. It was released about 2 weeks ago. The individual country reports tend to get staggered out over the following sort of month or two. So hopefully we should start to see the 2024 stats coming through in sort of the next year or so. But these will still be a good bracket for giving us an idea of what social media is looking like. So 4.2 million users, social media users in New Zealand. That's obviously in general, so split across all of the platforms. Massively deep penetration, right? So social media is a great channel to use in social media because everybody's on there. and they spend a lot of time on there. The bottom left-hand tile there, you can see 2 hours and 15 minutes spent per day using social media. That's out of an average of about 6.5 hours a day being online in general. So about a third of the amount of time that people spend online is spent using social media in one way, shape, or form. However, that one next to it, the green tile in the bottom left there, is the average number of social platforms used each month averages around about 6 per person. So there's a lot of people using social. They spend a lot of time there, but their time is split amongst the multiple different platforms. So the thing that we need to be aware of in that implication is that we need to be available on as many platforms as we can effectively manage that also makes sense for who our target audience is, right? So if you're potentially going after a real youth audience of like 18 to 24-year-olds, you'll probably focus on platforms more like Instagram and TikTok rather than X or LinkedIn, for example, because they're not real. That audience is not going to be there. We can't effectively manage, small businesses can't effectively manage 7 different social channels and do it right. So we want to focus our efforts on where our audience is. Now, this is a demographic snapshot of Meta's ad audience in particular. So this is Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. It's pretty broadly, what's the word I'm looking for? No, it's completely blank. It's very broadly looks like the social media profile in New Zealand in general. Slightly underrepresented in that 13 to 17-year-old range, though. You'll struggle to find demographic or any sort of data on any social media audiences under the age of 18, regardless of what platform you use. The platforms generally do not like to give us anybody that information to protect younger people, younger users. So, take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But primarily, social media tends to be concentrated in sort of the 45 and younger age. We have seen, however, a big increase in certain platforms in the use of 45-year-old and over, primarily on Facebook, and again, primarily driven by COVID, as the older generation used social media to stay in touch with friends and family when they weren't able to do so physically. So that has very interesting implications, right? That older audience, while they may be, a smaller representation of who is on social media, they do tend to spend a fair whack of time on it, increasingly so. And also that sort of 25 plus, or even if you want to be specific about it, is the people who have all the money in the economy, generally speaking. So when we're talking about using social media marketing, there's always, and marketing in general, there's an industrial habit of focusing on the tastemakers, the 18 to 25-year-olds, right? Don't forget that there is a massive cohort of people who are older than them who actually have disposable income to be able to buy the things that we're selling. So keeping that in mind when you're creating your content, that there could be 2 separate audiences that you could talk to and you could tailor and see, how effective you can be at driving things that way by keeping those people in mind. Now, in terms of the most used social media platforms, so this is the percentage of internet users 16 to 64 who use each platform per month. So 3/4 of Kiwis, almost 80% actually, use Facebook at least once a month. I think when I looked at the global report for this, and the most used social media platform globally actually is Instagram, I believe. So New Zealand, we kind of buck that trend in that we use Facebook more. I think just because it's much more heavily entrenched than Instagram ever was. But yeah, so keeping in mind, again, while people say, the younger generation are not using Facebook, they might not use it as often, but there's still 80% of Kiwis who are logging in at least once a month.
Yeah, I've noticed, Ollie, since I moved to New Zealand from the States, that Facebook is where all small communities come together as well. So as a smaller country with small communities within, it's such a great platform for people to really connect even on a more intimate level. So
Absolutely.
I can see why. Yeah.
And for smaller businesses, that's actually a really interesting point, right? You've got, I think, as far as I can tell, pretty much every suburb in New Zealand has its own little local Facebook group. And it gets used a lot. I'm in a couple around like Birkenhead and Northcote where I live. And they're prolific to say the least. As a small business or even as a sole trader, small operator working within that local community, those are really great resources to be able to actually provide, to be part of and provide value. A lot of them will have rules about what you can and can't do in terms of like trying to advertise or sell your services. But you will also, say if you're a plumber or a painter or a carpenter or something like that, you will find that there are people in there who are asking for recommendations or advice. As a small business owner, you can get in there and say, hey, I do this, this, and that. Give me a call, etc. So it's another avenue to look for leads for small businesses, right? Or you can offer your services to your local community. Especially, and again, post-COVID, the whole shop local, like local community vibe is much stronger than it used to be. So there's plenty of opportunities there. Now, in terms of the main reasons for using social media, I doubt this very much will have changed between 23 and 24. Primary reason that people are on social, we have to keep in mind, is that they're there to keep in touch with friends and family, or to fill spare time, or to get the news, etc. Like to find things, to actually find businesses or see content from brands, or finding inspiration for things to do and buy. About a quarter of people say that that's their primary reason for doing it. It'll be one of their top three regardless. But seeing content from brands is all the way down at like 17% of people say that's the main reason they use social media. So that's a context that we have to be aware of. People aren't necessarily on social media to see advertising and content from brands like, or marketing from people like us. They're there basically as a social fill-in time. So when we're creating content, we need to keep that context in mind. If you can create content that fits in with that, so provides something of value or of entertainment or interest, rather than just straight up, shouting at them that this is what you do and this is why you should buy my thing. Do it in a way that's interesting and engaging, means that they might actually stop and read it. Audiences are very savvy as to what marketing looks like online these days. So that's why you'll see a lot of those ads that you as a user stop and look at don't really look like ads like they used to. They've got some sort of hook and entertainment value to them. And so that's something that we've got to keep in mind, right? And then finally, this is an interesting little bit of context as well. Self-reporting of people who say what their favorite social media platform is. Again, a quarter of Kiwis say that Facebook is their favorite social media platform. I wouldn't be one of them, but regardless of what my personal taste is, this is what Kiwis are saying is their favorite platform. So again, Facebook, because it was the first, and it launched in New Zealand quite early compared to a lot of other countries. So Facebook sort of only went outside of sort of college campuses in the US in 2006 or 5, I believe, and it was available in New Zealand in 2007. So very, very early on in the piece, Kiwis got access to this. There were some countries that didn't have access to Facebook until at least after sort of 2010, right? So we were 3-4 years ahead of some other regions. And Kiwis are an early adopter in terms of technology. They tested FPOS here. We were one of the first countries in the world to try using FPOS as opposed to then the chip and pin version. So we tend to get used as a test bed because we're relatively small, but relatively wealthy and technologically advanced and early adopter style people. So that's why Facebook's been so ingrained, because it was there first and it's been there the longest. So it's still flowing through that most people will still prefer Facebook. However, Instagram and TikTok, for example, I would imagine in the 2024 results, if TikTok is not much closer to Instagram than it is now, if not overtaken it in 2024, I'd be quite surprised. It's had astronomical growth. So keep an eye on that one. That's kind of, the platform that everybody's looking at. So,
And I will just go back and say that I do notice, because I'm an Instagram person, I think that's the demographic I'm in, but I notice that a lot of TikTok ends up just crossing over into Instagram. So you'll see these TikTok reels on Instagram all the time.
Absolutely. Like there's this concept of crossover creative. So if you can find, and generally speaking, it tends to flow. If you can find creative that is successful and attention grabbing and works on a platform like TikTok, it will probably work pretty much anywhere else, maybe apart from LinkedIn. So if you have TikTok as part of your content strategy, potentially you can TikTok is a great place to use to test the kind of content that your audience might want to use and see what actually tweaks the dials in terms of business results, and then repurpose that across to other channels. Yeah. You'll see, 1 out of every 3 sort of Instagram reels actually has the TikTok watermark on it, because they've just created it in TikTok and then copied it across. Yeah, not unusual at all. Cool. So in terms of the platforms themselves then, and apologies, yes, I am trying to breeze through this quickly because I know the Q&A part is probably of more value to you than listening to me yammer on. So I'm going to get through this real quick if I can. In terms of Facebook overviews, just shy of 3 million of people that you can reach with ads on Facebook. So this is how they judge the audience size, is basically their advertising audience size that you can pay to advertise to. Now, with Facebook, we are seeing that they are shrinking in terms of audience size, and 100,000 users year on year. There were some changes in the methodology for how this report was put together. So take these numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt in terms of the changes, but it is a global trend that we are seeing, is that Facebook has kind of hit its peak in terms of users and now is starting to slowly decline. But even with that happening, still by far and away the largest audience in New Zealand. Engagement rates will be low. So, people aren't as engaged with Facebook as they are. They tend to browse a lot more and maybe do a lot, but it's still a very good driver of traffic. So if you're trying to drive traffic to a website, or you're trying to use any sort of conversion optimized ads, so you're using Facebook's ads manager platform to get people to take an action on your website, Facebook is 100% the best platform for front loading that. A combination of Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, those three platforms are kind of the ones with the most well-developed conversion setup of any social media platform out there, right? So if you've got any sort of e-commerce or any sort of online purchasing, or even just generating inquiries and leads, these platforms are kind of the absolute gold standard. You have to have them included, otherwise you're missing out on a massive chunk of your audience. With Instagram, so you can see they're 2.15 million, so much smaller, almost a million people smaller than Facebook. However, they are much more engaged in terms of the content that you create. So people are much more likely to engage with content on Instagram. It's also probably, out of all of the platforms outside of TikTok, the one where short form video rules the most. It's like 20% of time, like 1 out of every 5 minutes is spent watching Reels on Instagram now. Instagram also knows this. So Instagram Reels, when you put content on a platform, there's 2 different kinds of reach that you get. And reach is the number of people that your content gets delivered to. You've got organic reach, which is free, and the platform will push it out to a certain subsection of your follower base, depending on who they think is going to most enjoy it. On Facebook, that's really low. Like, it's between 2 and 8% of the people who follow your account. On Instagram, it's a little bit, it's about the same for stuff that you post to your feed. When you post stuff to your Reels, however, it's actually delivered to different people. So anything that you put on your posts, like just like an Instagram story or a post that's just put in your news feed, that is primarily organically delivered out to people who already follow you. For Reels, the primary audience is actually delivered to people who don't follow you, but based on their habits of the type of media that they consume on Instagram, Instagram will go, oh, these people actually might like George's video. I'm going to deliver it to them, even though they don't follow them. And that's the critical difference when using Reels, right? Is that it reaches an audience of people who maybe haven't discovered you already. So it's a really effective way of actually finding new people, new audiences, and growing your audience, rather than just delivering your content to the same people over and over again. So if you have an Instagram account and you haven't been experimenting with Reels, number one thing, go out, film some Reels, find something to film, and just try it. Same with TikTok, right? Just try and see what your audience wants out of you. TikTok. So you can see this is the first platform that we're going to talk about now that has actually grown year on year. Not a huge, sorry, I was looking at the quarter on quarter numbers. The year on year numbers, you can see they've grown by almost 13%. So almost 190,000 users added between 2022 and 2023. I wouldn't imagine that would have slowed down a huge amount this year. I'd say they'd be tapping on 2 million in New Zealand at this point. And also keep in mind that these numbers are based on the audience 18 plus only. We know there's a massive chunk of audience who are under 18. So that audience is actually probably even bigger. This is kind of the platform where the reason why it's done so well and why it has such a high usage rate. So globally, the amount of time spent on TikTok versus anywhere else is about 50 to 55 minutes a day spent browsing TikTok for heavy users. And again, if we think back to our overall stats, people in New Zealand spend about 2 hours a day using social in general. Potentially up to half of that is being used on TikTok alone. And that's because the way that TikTok delivers content is very different from the other platforms. It prioritizes delivering you, the individual user, more content that is based around the stuff that you've already been watching. So it's keeping an eye on the types of videos you watch to the end, videos that you interact with, liking it, engaging with it, commenting on it, sharing it, whatever that may be. And it's analyzing who the content creators are, what the type of content is, and it's just feeding you more of that. That's why you have that thing where you log on to TikTok and you think you've been there for 5 minutes and you've actually been there for an hour. That's because the algorithm is that good at keeping you focused on that app. And that's actually what Instagram copied when they did the Reels thing. So it's called a recommendation-based system as opposed to a network-based, which is what traditional social media platforms have worked on.
So those of us who then want to advertise on TikTok or use TikTok to get our brand out there, is it harder then to get in front of a broader group of people, or is it easier to get specific with the people that you're trying to reach?
It's actually easier to reach more people on TikTok once it's easier to go viral essentially, right? Because the algorithm is delivering your content based on individual people's actual user habits. If you can hit on a sort of a content vein that people want, then it will spread much easier than it would on a platform like Instagram or Facebook.
Okay.
Which is primarily focused more around sort of networks and interactions and looking at sort of you as part of a social web of the rest of the people that you interact with. TikTok doesn't really care too much about who your friends are. It cares about what you're doing because it wants to maximize the amount of time that you spend on there. And so in that respect, it's really good for experimentation. If you want an example of a guy who's doing TikTok really well in sort of a small business, local New Zealand context, there's a guy, he runs a shoe repair shop in Wellington. In Tauranga. His name's, I've forgotten his last, Shane Barr, I think it is. Shane Barr from Shane Barr Shoe Repairs, yeah. So he set himself a challenge I did a couple of talks with him last year for another provider, and he basically said that post-COVID, his normal Facebook and Instagram advertising wasn't doing as well as it had done before. And his daughters were spending a lot of time on TikTok, and they actually suggested to him that he should try it. So he set himself a challenge that he was going to post one video a day for 30 days on TikTok. Didn't really give a toss about what it was about, just about stuff that he knew as a shoe repairer. And so he posted a video every day. Bunch of them were misses. So most of them got less than 1,000 views. And then he started talking about how to like clean and repair Birkenstocks. All of a sudden, he was up in the millions of views. So what started as a 30-day challenge, when he ended up managed to get into a streak of over 90 days posting every single day. And, a lot of those views were coming from people from all around the world. But what he also then saw in turn after that is people then contacting him through TikTok DMs. His website traffic went up. He would get, he tells stories about how he gets a pair of shoes in the mail to his store that have just come apropos of nothing. And it's got a little note in it saying, I need you to repair this, blah, blah, blah. He actually got one where he didn't know who it was. The lady just put her first name, but didn't put any return contact details. So he went back onto TikTok and said, these got sent to me. I don't know who they're from. Can you guys help me find it? Found it within 2 days. So so he's a real good example of simple stuff. So you go on his channel, it's all very lo-fi, no setups, everything's under 15 seconds, just very simple, him in front of his gear. But that's the idea, right? You've got to try these things to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Don't be afraid of churning out a whole bunch of misses until you find what it is that your audience wants. And TikTok is kind of the perfect platform for that.
Yeah, and like you said, just that under 15 seconds, right? So I guess there is an attention span.
There is an attention span, absolutely. People don't tend to watch. Well, you can go longer than 15 seconds, but you have to give people a really good reason to do it. TikTok as a platform generally is more, 70% of the content on there is under 20 seconds. However, we're starting to see a sort of an emerging trend of especially Gen Z users are starting to actually use TikTok as their primary long form content platform as well. So you can watch videos up to 10 minutes. You can upload a video up to 10 minutes long on TikTok. And we're starting to see a little bit more of that long form content being done there. sort of challenging the YouTube space, which has kind of been the long form content platform of choice for most people. But starting to see a little bit of a trend in there, and that the Zoomers are jumping on TikTok for longer periods. But yeah, definitely a really good platform to experiment with. And as I mentioned, if it works here, it'll probably work in most other places as well. LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is our primary B2B audience. And funnily enough, outside of the other traditional social media networks has been growing year on year. So they added a decent amount of users in the year 22 to 23. They kind of go back and forth with Instagram as being sort of the number 2 platform in terms of size in New Zealand. But yeah, very much a B2B audience, or any sort of thought leadership stuff that you're wanting to do if you work in that B2B space. So it has its sort of limitations. The paid advertising on it is very expensive because they've got such a high value audience. So it's a bit more situational. Might be one that you want to include in the mix if you have any sort of B2B focus there. And then finally, X / formerly known as Twitter. These numbers that you see in that top right-hand corner, the year-on-year change in reported Twitter ad reach, take that with a massive grain of salt for 2 reasons. One, it's self-reported, and anything that comes out of Twitter since Elon Musk bought it has to be taken with a mountain mine-sized grain of salt. And 2, a lot of those users, I believe, were basically creating accounts to watch the house burn down, so to speak. Twitter already was a very situational platform. It was mainly the home of, global media, businesses, politicians and journalists, essentially, and people who needed to be kept up to the date to the minute of things that were happening globally. That has become less relevant these days. You can see here is less than 1 million users. I'd be very surprised if they'd had any growth in the last couple of years, if not shrunken by quite a lot. So yeah, Twitter, and my recommendation, not to be cynical, but unless you absolutely have to be on there, I don't see a massive use for it anymore. Yeah, this unfortunate, but it is what it is. So now that we kind of have a little bit of an overview of the platforms, I'm going to quickly go through the basic building blocks of a basic social media strategy that you need. And the first one is the objective planning. Any good strategy has to start from what it is that strategy is designed to do. Everything that you want to do on social in terms of your social media marketing has to have a reason for existing. And it's something that we see constantly over and over and over again, especially in the SME area, is that people do social media because they think that they need to be doing it, and they create content for the sake of creating content that very obviously doesn't actually have a reason to exist. And that's just a waste of time, energy, resources that could be better spent doing other things. So we need to understand what it is that we want social media to do. Where does it sit in our overall marketing mix? Is it supporting other digital channels, or is it our main digital channel? You need to think about these things to see how it all slots together. So when we normally get clients in for a strategy session, these are the objectives that they want. I want to drive brand awareness. I want to generate e-commerce sales. I want to generate engagement, or sales leads, or build a community. All of those are great. Now, but when you are creating objectives, you need to be very smart about them. And when I say smart, I'm actually talking specifically about that old school marketing and objective planning acronym, SMART, which is specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and time-bound. So keeping those things in mind. So say brand awareness, right? I want to increase brand awareness. Who do you want to increase brand awareness with? Who's your target audience? Why is it important that they know who you are? What does brand awareness look like? Is it an increase in traffic to certain pages on your website? Or is it just getting your message in front of a lot of people? If that's the one, how are you going to measure whether they're actually more aware of you or not, right? So it's taking it that little one step deeper than just saying, I want to drive brand awareness. Now we need to actually figure out what that means and what that looks like, and then how social media can fit within that. And even something as simple as engagement, right? Engagement is one of the key metrics that has kind of always been floating around in social. It's one of the ones that it does really well as well. Most other channels don't really have any sort of engagement mechanics to them. It's just a broadcast medium, right? Social media is a two-way communications channel. So that's why engagement tends to focus a lot in there. Now, I just want you to don't fall into the trap of driving engagement for engagement's sake. It's got to have a reason. That engagement has to have a reason for existing. But generating engagement can, in and of itself, be an objective. Say, for example, you are an FMCG product, like a supermarket brand. No direct path to purchase, so there's no way that you can actually just sell your stuff directly to a consumer. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to remember who you are, so that when they get to the supermarket shelf and they see your product, they go, oh yeah, I saw this ad, that ad, or this piece of content that this brand made that was quite interesting, so maybe I'll try them, or a recipe that they put out there. I'm going to follow their recipe, which has all of their ingredients in it. Chelsea Sugar is a prime example of this. The Edmonds cookbook and the Chelsea cookbooks, the only reason they exist is to sell their sugar, because their ingredients list is 200 grams of Chelsea sugar, not white sugar, Chelsea sugar. That's why recipe inspiration is such a massive thing for like FMCG brands, because it's always got their products in the product list. But yeah, an example of that we did was Indomie, New Zealand. They're an Indonesian mee goreng instant noodle brand. Obviously, they don't have a direct path to purchase. We identified as part of their strategy, their key target audience was, as you're all probably guessing, students, young people. And so what was the language of the internet that those people speak? It's memes, it's humor, it's making people laugh. They don't really care about the flavor profiles or how it's traditionally Indonesian or anything like that. They don't care. They like that it's tasty, but they also like to be entertained. So the Indomie New Zealand page is literally just all memes. And we had a rule where you weren't allowed to use the flavor names. So the blue one's a barbecue chicken, but we never call them barbecue chicken. You just say the blue one. Or the pink one, which is hot and spicy, you just say the pink one. Because that's how people looked at it. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So just to say that engagement in and of itself can help achieve business goals, but you have to keep it in mind that what are you trying to achieve through that engagement? And social media, it's going to sound like blasphemy coming from a social media specialist. It's not going to be the silver bullet that solves all of your marketing problems. It is a tool. It is a part of a wider mix. It should be part of a sort of a more comprehensive marketing plan. There are things that it does really well. There are things that it does terribly. Brand awareness, for example, is really actually just raising pure brand awareness can be quite difficult to do on social media because it's such a cluttered and noisy landscape. But used as, video content on social media alongside, maybe display or Google advertising or a good SEO and SEM strategy and maybe some email marketing thrown into the mix for good measure. That is a comprehensive marketing plan, not just chucking a video up on social and thinking that people are going to remember you because of it, right? So just
Well,
keep it in mind.
it is really interesting though. It is a shortcut though for people to come and see what you're offering or how you play in the realm of marketing. It used to be just a website, right? Oh, do you have a website? First it was your business card. Oh, do you have a business card? Now
Yeah,
I'm aging myself. And
absolutely.
then it's like, oh, do you have a website? And it used to just be a landing page. Now they're so comprehensive. And then it's like, oh, I just want a shortcut. What's your Insta? Are you on TikTok? Are you on Facebook? And then they can get an overview of what you do in like a snapshot. So yeah, it's
And it's
fascinating.
it's quite interesting that you make that comparison, right? So we find that the best strategy for using social media is in support of things like a website, right? Mainly because with social, unfortunately, it's all rented space. So the way that the platforms run and the space that we have on them, Mark Zuckerberg could click his fingers and tomorrow every single small to medium business page in New Zealand gone, never coming back. You have no recourse. Your business is done. So, relying on those spaces is not necessarily a very long-term business strategy. By all means, build your business there, but have a contingency, generally speaking, as a website, right? But yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind that these platforms are also being used as search engines. So Google, biggest search engine in the world. Second, YouTube. Third, Facebook. Then TikTok is in there as well. Like, especially anybody under the age of 35, they will use YouTube and TikTok as search engines. They go in and say, how do I do this to find video content to show them to solve the problem that they've got? So that's where potentially with businesses and services can create content that answers those questions. And because you're the one who answered them, if they need your services, you're probably more likely to be the one that they call.
Ollie, I didn't even think about YouTube. Those of you listening, have you thought about YouTube? That's true. We go onto YouTube and like, how do you fix my refrigerator? I make my husband look up everything every time something breaks. I'm like, go fix the dryer. Go to YouTube.
I
Yeah.
didn't include it in the channel stats before because it's not technically a social channel. It's a video hosting platform that they've tacked some social community stuff onto. But yeah, it's second largest search engine in the world by volume, by far above everyone else. So, if you have any sort of how-to or stuff that you've provided as value add, absolutely chuck it up on YouTube as well.
Wow. You know what, guys? I think I'm going to try and do an event based on YouTube now that I've gotten all lit up about it. So, but
Nice.
anyway, continue.
All right. So the second part of that then is now that we've figured out what we're going to do, the content part of it is kind of how we do it. So you can have a really good strategy. If your content sucks, it's not going to do anything, right? So we need to be able to generate high quality content consistently, quickly, and effectively, right? It can be content can be sort of the most time consuming part of any social media manager's job if you let it get out of hand. But you have to be able to create high quality content that's interesting and engaging to your target audience because social media is incredibly busy, as I mentioned before. It is a very cluttered space. You're potentially talking to people across multiple channels. They're getting bombarded with, up to 500 different pieces of content per channel per day. You're in a very competitive space. So your content needs to be high quality to be able to cut through. And if you can create that content that's engaging and interesting, then it will spread through your friends' networks. Or if you're on a platform like TikTok, it will get recommended more often because the platform is seeing that people are engaging with your content. But it's quite hard to do consistently. So there's two tools that I'm going to share with you, two little exercises that you can go away and do to try and help you with that process. So the first one is creating what we call a brand tone or a brand voice. The reason why this is important is, especially for small to medium businesses, right? If you're, a lot of the time the tone of voice may be you as the individual or something that you have created as you've built your business. If you want to get more serious into social media marketing, it might be an idea to formalize how your business sounds on social media for a couple of reasons. One, you have a consistent tone. So every time people encounter you online, it's the same voice talking to them. Two, if you decide to take on, say, like an intern or pass the social media onto a larger marketing team as you start to grow, you've got a written set of documents that you can say, this is what our brand sounds like on social. Go ahead and create content using this tone of voice. Having that written down somewhere and documented means, if you engage an agency like us, it's much easier for us to actually step into your brand's voice alongside the other, 6 or 7 different brands that we manage and keep it separate and consistent. So this is an exercise that we recommend, that we give to people. And essentially, you've got a matrix here of attributes of, you imagine that you're building a person. So if your social media presence for your business was an actual person, sometimes we say like a superhero, how would they talk? So it's not necessarily about what you do as a business, but it's how your business talks and presents itself online. And you can do this as a team. So if you've got like sort of a wider team that has conversations about the marketing that you do, get everybody to do this exercise individually without discussing it first. So you basically say, here's the matrix, here's a sheet of paper, pick a box 1 to 4, left to right. There is no middle box, so there's no sitting on the fence. You have to choose an attribute and then come back and throw all of your results up onto a big whiteboard and see where you agree is great, where you disagree and you have contrasting opinions about what you believe the brand should sound like. That's where those interesting conversations come about, because then you can go, okay, why did you think, Georgia, why do you think we were number 1 on Sassy when I think we should be number 4 on Humble? Where is that disconnect? And you can maybe come to a compromise, or maybe I might come up to Georgia and say, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I want us to be more whatever. That gets everybody on the same page. And it's more than just one person having input to it. So this is, I find, is always just a fun exercise just to do, even if it's just to get a bunch of people on the same page, or even if it's just to get your own thoughts out onto a sheet of paper as well. And then the final thing is figuring out what your content is actually going to be. So we have a content planning framework that we use for all of our clients at Mosh. Whenever we bring them on board, we'll have a big discovery and strategy session that lasts for the better part of a day. I'm going to condense that into about 5 minutes. Apologies. And it all centers around what we call our content pillars. So content pillars, we generally have 3 of them only. And these are top level, very, very broad content buckets of things that we're going to talk about. This example that I've got here is for a brand called Only Good. They're a supermarket body wash brand. This is an older version of what they did, which is why I can share it with you. But their 3 content pillars were New Zealand made, feel good, and inspiration. So New Zealand made because they were a New Zealand owned and operated company. So that was an important part of their brand identity. And they also know, and this is the key part, they also know that their target audience cared about New Zealand made products as well. So it's finding sort of subjects that you can talk about that are relevant for you as a business, but also have a tie into what your audience wants as well, because then you can have that conversation with them. Feel good, very broadly interpretable, feel good externally with the good stuff you put on your body, internally with using some of the superfoods that are some of the ingredients of Only Good, and maybe even emotionally and mentally as well. Their target audience was a bit whole on that wellness buzz, right? Sort of they're not the cheapest, so they're sort of that mid to upper socioeconomic target there. And then inspiration, again, talking to those same sort of people, inspiration in terms of design. The owners of Only Good were a really big design head, so they did like limited edition packaging with Kiwi artists like Phlox and stuff like that. So that design work came into their thinking. So we had these 3 content pillars. Now, what we take from there is we extrapolate that out into this. So this is our content framework. So we take those 3 pillars, and that's the first thing and probably going to be the hardest part that you do, is figuring out what those pillars are. And then you break them out into content topics, which are more specific and targeted topics that all relate back to that one pillar. Generally, you can have 3 pillars. We would say no more than that. But with the content topics, feel free to have minimum 3, maximum, 5, 6, 7 if you need to. You can see in the middle there, the feel good has actually got 5 topics instead of just the standard 3. But generally, if you need to be able to split a pillar out into at least 3 different topics. So yeah, those are a little bit more focused. And then the triggers, these are the actual ideas for posts, pieces of content. So everything on that right-hand side there, that's essentially where you do your brainstorming. So, you can have as many as you want. We've got 3 or 4 examples here, but that side of that framework can go on forever as far as we care. As long as you can come up with an idea for a post that relates back to a topic, that relates back to a trigger, that everything is on brand, it's on message, and hopefully, if you've got your research right, it's relevant to both you and your target audience.
And Ollie, this looks great as far as like those of us who really need to compartmentalize and put things into boxes, like having this as a framework to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me and the way my brain works, and I'm going to make an assumption that for most of us, if you don't have it in front of you in this way, it feels messy and hard to tackle and really overwhelming. So
100%.
it's really great to get to see it in this I love all the little boxes.
Well, I think most people in this room probably have some version of this up here, but it's just about putting it into a framework, into something that you can put on a sheet of paper and then, blow this up to A3 size, stick it up on the wall. When it comes to, you sit down and you dedicate your couple of hours to creating content for the next couple of weeks, you go, oh yeah, I can see we've got Easter coming up. So I'm going to create an Easter post, new product line launching. I saw this article that fits into this topic. And you can just start, rather than sitting at a blank sheet of paper and going, what do I talk about now? You've got all of these ideas to trigger ideas in your brain to go, oh yeah, I can do this, 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 and this. And then you can actually get to the situation that you want to get to is actually being able to plan ahead of time. So if you can batch create content, a week, 2 weeks, go a holy grail, a month in advance, you then give yourself all of that time to focus on what my next round of content is going to be. And you just avoid being in that situation where it's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and you're going, shit, I haven't posted anything on Friday. I need to get something out. And you, I don't know, take a snap at the neighbor's cat and put that up there and it means nothing. It's a crap example, but you know what I mean. So putting together a framework like this, and if it looks different, that's fine. But this is the one that we use and it helps us. We push out about close to 600 pieces of content a month, and that's across 7 social media managers and 3 graphic designers. So A framework like this is the only way that we can do that. The final thing that I wanted to quickly brief over is social media advertising. So we've got our objectives, we know what we're trying to do. We've got our content, we know how we're going to do it or the things that we're going to talk about to help us achieve those. The paid media side of these platforms is the final piece of that puzzle. As I mentioned, organic reach sucks. Primarily, the content's not going to go very far unless you're managing to crank out viral hit after viral hit, which, will only last so long. So understanding what the paid advertising platforms do and how they work is going to be crucial to using that as a way to amplify the successes rather than just leaving it up to the algorithm, so to speak. And the things that you can do get broadly broken down into different layers of the marketing funnel, which is, brand awareness at the top, consideration in the middle, conversion at the bottom. So brand awareness is all about reaching a lot of people. So these are all the meta examples of objectives that you can choose. And I'm not going to go into them in massive detail because, again, we're running out of time. But brand awareness is all about delivering ads to people who Meta believes will remember seeing them after a couple of days. They do it through a whole bunch of guesswork and wizardry and a couple of little exit surveys that they'll ask a small section of your audience. Reach is all about broadcasting your content to as many people as possible. Maybe not very many times, so they may only see it once, but you will reach a lot of people for the smallest amount of cost per 1,000 people reached. That may sound good, but how do we know that they actually remembered seeing it? We don't necessarily. Consideration, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of where most people will spend their social media marketing budget. So traffic is about driving people from Facebook, from that social media platform somewhere else, whether it be to a website, into a messaging conversation, into an app. Most of the time we'll be using it to drive traffic to our website. Engagement does what it says on the tin. Essentially, you're driving engagement on the content itself. You can also use it to increase the number of followers that you have on some platforms, allow you to do like page-like campaigns, and then event responses. So trying to get people to respond to events that you might create. Video views, obviously, that's what it says on the tin, trying to get as many people as possible to watch your video. And then lead generation is about getting people to fill out a form, giving you their contact information in exchange for you getting back in touch with them in the future. That's really useful for things like newsletters and signups and stuff like that. And then the conversion side. So conversions is essentially where we're trying to get people to do something. So that conversions objective, generally speaking, is we define an action on a website using the meta pixel, which is a bit of code that lives on your website, and say, this is a desirable action that I want. Look at all of the people who are doing it. And then I'm going to create a campaign like using this conversion objective, find me more people who look like the ones already doing the thing, and get more of them to do it for me. So you're driving purchases, driving sign up registrations to a form or whatever, like anything that you can define as an action, you can use these conversion objectives to get more people to do it. And then finally, catalog sales. That's a meta specific one where you've got your product catalogs of this is mostly an e-commerce thing, and you can drive people to generate sales off the top of those. So I think I'm pretty much done. Now with the advertising side of things, I could talk about this for literally days. And funnily enough, next week I will be. So,
No, yeah, definitely. Tell us about this. I wanted to bring this up actually so that everyone knows if you want to dive deeper in all of this stuff with Ollie, here's your opportunity. Ollie, I'll let you talk about this, and then we do have a question, but talk about this, the masterclass that you're offering over at Mosh.
Yeah, so we started running these masterclasses last year. So essentially it sounds very ominous, the social media advertising masterclass. Essentially, it is 3 90-minute webinar sessions, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning, 9:30 till 11 o'clock, where we go through in much more detail the advertising platform of social. So the first session is a much more comprehensive and deeper dive into the basic principles of how the paid media side works. So essentially what we just talked about for the last 5 minutes, but for 90 minutes, including what you need to know about how these platforms deliver things, how to set up your campaigns, etc. The second session is all about what we call performance marketing, so using social media advertising to drive business outcomes. And then the third session on the Wednesday, that's all about creative. So how to generate and create content, or creative as we call it, that is attention grabbing and actually drives people to do the things that you're asking to do. So it's really tightly focused on basically here's how we recommend you use social media to actually drive specific business outcomes. So yeah, it'll work for pretty much most businesses. At least the principles that you learn can be applied in almost any industry. Normally that is costed out at about $5.99 plus platform fees. Georgia and I have worked on a little bit of a deal, and for anybody who accesses it through the Digital Boost offers platform, you can join up for $2.99. So that's basically half price.
Yeah, if you go onto the platform, you'll see there's an offers page. If you
Mhm.
can't find it, reach out to support. I'm sure they'll help you find it. But yeah, that link will take you in to our special digital boost discount.
And it's just, yeah, exclusive for you guys only. So nobody else can get that pricing. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a pitch, but I would also encourage, the reason I'm pitching it here is because I want businesses to succeed. And I honestly believe that this will be valuable to anybody who's obviously got an interest in social media. You wouldn't have one if you weren't here. This will just help take things a little bit to the next level.
Yeah, we do have a bunch of questions here. And just also just to say for you, Ollie, as well, and to everyone. And the reason is Ollie can only come on here for so many times and so many sessions where we've got him for an hour here, 2 hours there. And I know that you all show up to want to soak up all of this wisdom. So this is a great opportunity, also a tax write-off for your business. I mean, look, I'm always looking for that tax write-off. I'm always looking for it. But it's a way that if you really, really want to get that specific knowledge and really hone in on what you need for your business, I think I'm not pushing anything because we're not allowed to push anything here at Digital Boost, but I'm just saying what a great opportunity. So thank you, Ollie, for offering us that generous offer.
No
Let's
problem.
get through these questions. You guys are really active here, and I love it. Welcome, welcome, everyone. All right, so putting together my first social media campaign, and we're starting off basically. Thank you for this. It has helped. Is Buffer good for scheduling, or are there better scheduling apps that you can recommend? We only have Canva/Figma for creating content.
Oh God, there's a million different scheduling tools out there. A lot of the platforms have their own native scheduling now anyways, but Buffer is a good one. I think in terms of which one's good or not, it's really just about trying a bunch of them and figuring out what works best in your workflow. If Buffer works for you and the pricing point is right, then go with Buffer. If you want to try doing the native scheduling on all of the different platforms, then try that as well. But generally speaking, once you get outside of just Facebook and Instagram and you start adding in, TikTok and LinkedIn, etc., like it starts to become unmanageable to keep going across the different platforms. So yeah, I've used Buffer before. I have no issues with it. I've used other platforms like Gain, which is probably another one that's in that similar vein, but it's just what works best for you, really.
And do any of these, can you use them for free for a trial period just so you get it? Do you know, or you probably don't?
Most of them will give you, yeah, most of them will give you some sort of like, 2-week free trial just to see how it fits in terms of the workflow. Even a lot of them, like you'll find with a lot of these platforms, right? If you sign up for a paid plan, use it for a couple of days and think, nah, shit, this doesn't work for me. If you get in contact with support and say, hey, look, I wanted to try this out, but it's not working with my workflow. Can we refund the fees? Most of them will probably refund you that. If you do it early enough, they'll probably just refund you, no questions asked, and go, yeah, sure. It's not in their best interest to be dicks about it. So
Oh, that's actually a good point to me. I don't know if a lot of people would ask for that. So thank you
I
for
mean, we were doing some project work, and there was a subscription rolled over for a creative AI tool that I was experimenting with. By the way, it was crap. Don't bother using it. But we didn't unsubscribe early enough, so it was like a $700 subscription, and I was like, can we get rid of that? And they were like, yeah, sure, it's fine. Can see you haven't used it, so they'd rather not be dicks about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, John. Kia ora. So John is asking how, and I'm noticing, I see all your questions, and I know there are a lot of AI questions here. So I'm going to probably group those together so we ask those at the same time. But John, yours is also AI. Okay.
Yeah,
All
there's a
right.
bunch of them. Yeah.
So John is saying, how are you finding with the growth of AI use, people are keeping to their brand tone and voice?
So yeah, it's AI is an interesting one, right? Because it's an like full disclosure, I use AI all the time. However, the hype around AI in marketing, I'll give you a piece of advice for free. It is not stealing jobs. It never will. It's not going to replace the marketing industry for a couple of reasons. First off, AI, as good as it is, it actually does not generate new ideas. All it does is it takes all of the other ideas that it's basically scraped from the internet, smashes them all together, and gives you an output that's what it thinks is closest to what you're asking for with the prompt that you've given it. So what we're starting to, and we're seeing it increasingly more and more, is that it's all becoming very sort of homogenous. Like AI looks the same and it sounds the same. Where I see AI in general is using AI as a tool to enhance your performance as opposed to replacing it. So, for example, when we're creating, say we're working with a content creator and we want them to do a bunch of reels or TikToks for a brand that we're collaborating with. I'll feed a prompt into ChatGPT and say, give me a script for a 30-second TikTok style video in the form of a three reasons why format, explaining the benefits of this, and this, and you give it a list of all the benefits, talking to this audience using this tone of voice, it'll spit it out. That first draft will probably be, maybe if I'm lucky, 70% there. And then I will take that and I will rewrite it to actually make it sound like a human being
Well,
instead of an AI written ad. And
and
then
I
that's the script that I will give to our content creator. But I've basically cut out about 2 hours of work of writing that first initial draft.
100%. And I think that's what people don't realize is, especially with marketing and creative jobs like this, AI does not have a soul.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what, as humans, we're connecting on this level where, it's art. This is where we're coming from. So AI doesn't have that creativity that's really going to connect with you. So I love that. It's a great point.
And there's a bunch of gray areas in terms of, like, IP and copyright, like all of this data that AI is trained on. Do they actually legally have permission to go out and scrape the entire internet and create content that looks like other artists? Like, there's so it's an interesting tool. It's one that's definitely useful and definitely, like, it's not going away. It's going to become part of just
Mhm.
a basic workflow of anything going forward. Things like AI generated captions for videos is great. TikTok does it all the time. So if you don't have talent to put in a video, then you just tell the AI to say it, and you've still got a voiceover then, but you don't have to necessarily hire someone to do it for you. So John was saying, how do you find the growth of AI use people are keeping to their brand tone and voice? Yeah, that's down to the individual person, the marketing manager, to manage that AI to make sure that it stays on brand and rewrite the content that it gets given. There was another anonymous one here saying there is so much AI out there. Are there things to watch out for in particular to determine whether the company behind the marketing is genuinely creating their content? We want to use it ourselves for efficiency, but don't want to abuse it, so to speak. So in that one, for example, like, there's arguments to be made that, like, people actually, if the company is actually genuinely creating their content or not. For certain aspects of marketing, AI generated content, I generally don't have an issue with. Like, if you're using it for like SEO and SEM purposes, right? So for generating a large amount of blog content, for example, we might use AI to write a first draft on a blog post that we've been meaning to write, and then we'll basically fill it in with sources that we cite and making sure that we're actually filling in the gaps of what the AI has given us. But again, it's a streamlining and efficiency tool rather than writing our content for us. One thing that I would always recommend is, if you are using it to do any sort of first draft, if it gives you any numbers or facts or specific claims and it says this is a thing, check every single one of them, because it has a really nasty habit of just making shit up. There was that, I don't know if you guys heard, there was that story of a guy who got ChatGPT to write his bar entrance essay to the New York bar to become a lawyer, and it was citing cases that did not exist, and he didn't check it and he submitted it, and they were like, what is this? This
Mhm.
thing versus thing is not a real case. So yeah. Claire's asked a couple of questions here. Real editing tool recommendations, making it easy and quick but effective edits, and then TikTok growth tactics. Funnily enough, I'm going to give you an answer that probably dovetails into both of those questions. One of the best Reels style video editing tools out there that is free is CapCut, which is TikTok's video editing tool. It's available on mobile, but it's also available on computer. So you can get a desktop version of CapCut, which is essentially like Adobe Premiere Pro Lite. It has all of the same features. It works the same way. It's a very, very well fleshed out video editor, but it has all of TikTok's voiceover tools in it. It has all of the cutout stuff, so you can do like you can cut your head out and stamp it over the top of another video. And so because Reels and TikToks are essentially the same thing on a different platform, you can use that really effectively to edit those videos. I always recommend video editing unless you're like 100% native, I always prefer to edit my videos on desktop and then export them for use on mobile, just because it allows you to be a little bit more creative. But the Reels editing tool that's built into Instagram Reels now as well is super, super powerful. It's got all the transitions built into it and stuff. It's just figuring out how to use them.
And you can use those on desktop as well. Your
I'm
Instagram,
not
your
sure
TikTok.
about the Reels one. Oh, yeah, the TikTok one, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Reels one is built into the mobile app specifically, not the desktop version. So, yeah, CapCut is probably a good video editor that you can get for free that will probably do pretty much 99% of what you need it for. And then in terms of TikTok growth tactics, which was Claire's second question, I think I'd like to go back to my Shane Bar shoe repairs example. Have a look at what he's done. Like with TikTok, it's all about finding the content that your audience vibes with. But the only way to do that is to try a lot of different things. But the underlying concept for growth on any social platform, just growth in general, is provide value. So there's an idea called a positive value exchange, right? Every piece of content that you have should have a positive value exchange built into it. Either it's from you to your audience in the terms of information, entertainment, whatever it may be. You want to be giving them something for free with no question, no strings attached to it. Because you do enough of that, when it comes to the point where you then have a piece of content that has a positive value exchange in your favor, it's not apropos of nothing. So you've given them something first before you ask for it again. But then that's where that purpose comes in, right? Having a reason for each piece of content, whether it's a value exchange in their favor or yours, that will help. But yeah, if you want to grow stuff, figure out what your audience wants and give them more of it in a way that's uniquely yours.
Great.
And
then a couple more AI questions.
I think I've basically answered those. Yeah, what the power of AI? Yeah, the power of AI is in amplifying your skills as a marketer, not about replacing them. And using AI for content to common and recommended practice, increasingly common. Absolutely recommend it in terms of a productivity tool as opposed to replacing stuff. Like I've done for some channels, like one of our clients, for example, we're having an Easter giveaway and they work in construction. And I could not find a stock image that worked with what I wanted to do. So I went onto ChatGPT and onto Midjourney, sorry, and I asked it to create me an orange hard hat with bunny ears. And I used that as the basis of our content. And then we basically stamped that out of that, chucked that into the other part of the image that I've got. So we used it to create a creative element that didn't exist before. But I didn't just wholesale put that image on there and say, this is my content. I had to edit it as well. So.
Well, like you said, it's a great productivity tool. So it's saving us a lot of time. That's what
100%.
That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I don't see any more questions. And we've gone over time because as it is with this, I know that Ollie, you have a busy day, but thank you so much. Thank you always for coming and sharing your mahi with us, your expertise. Thank you for all of you who show up and ask your questions. That's what we're here for. And for those of you watching the recording, any questions you might have, come to us at support@digitalboost.co.nz and head on over to our offers page and really dive deep into this land of social media marketing and advertising. You're all showing up here because you want something. Let's get more of it. Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing day, and I will see you all on Thursday. I hope. Matewa.
Thanks, guys. See you later.